So for this video, I want to paint this texture onto this bird. That will be applied to the color channel using the 3D paint tool. Basically what I'm doing is I'm painting a two-dimensional texture onto the UV mapped bird using a Maya tool. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is look at the UVs of this bird, and can't really tell what's going on. They're stretched out across this UV map here. Remember that our texture is going to repeat over this one-to-one. So the texture is going to be placed one-to-one, and then anything outside of that is a repetition of that texture. So we want to make sure all of our UVs are mapped within this one-to-one. So I'm going to generate, because this bird is symmetrical, let me look through it from the front view, and I'm gonna generate UVs based on camera-based. So now I have this bird and it's fitting. Basically the UVs are overlapped here. So anything I paint, I think, should be applied to both sides. The top and the front might have some issues with the stretching of the texture, but I think that because I'm prioritizing the side of this bird, this is how I'm going to lay out my UVs. So for the paint tool to work, I need to actually be using a Maya shader. So I'm going to use a Lambert, and it's going to apply a color channel here. A texture file, and I'm going to generate in Maya to the color channel. So let's go ahead and do that. The way to do it is drop down menu and go to rendering. And I'm going to say texturing, 3D paint tool. So now with the paint tool selected, let me make sure I'm in object mode. Go back to my paint tool, and it's not allowing me to paint on this model because I don't have a texture file assigned. So I'm going to go ahead and say assign and edit textures. And the default here is going to be 256 by 256, and in my IFF file, I'm changing those values to 512 by 512, which is just a larger image file, which will retain more detail. And I'm going to change it to a JPEG so I can modify it in Photoshop if I need to after. I'm going to say assign edit textures. Now that I've done that, I'm going to save the texture. And let me also select the bird and edit delete all by type history, because I can see here that I have a number of nodes based on the all of the modeling and sculpting I did last couple videos ago. So I want to get rid of all of those. So let me go ahead and delete all by type history. So now I just have, and make sure that my Lambert 3, okay, Lambert 3 has been applied. And now I want to assign and edit a texture again, assign that texture. And let's see if I can't save this texture. And now we have it saved, okay? So I'm gonna have to save it before I finish editing it. So now I'm able to paint on the surface. And let's see, let's choose a color here, be this red color, and now you can see that the red is being applied. I think what I'll do for this bird is I'll flood the surface here first. Let me pick a better color, a little bit brighter of a kind of rust colored. I'm gonna say flood paint. So the whole bird is applied with that color, and then I'll paint in its wings, gray. Let's start with that. Let's go to our, actually before I do that, I'm gonna do the work I can on the body, and then I'll paint the wings separately. So what I'll do is I can be painting with this paintbrush, but I can also, undo all of that. I can also assign a new paintbrush. I can go here to my shape profiles. I can choose a paintbrush here. I can also choose my own paintbrush, and I've created them. Let me show you them here. I'm going to open Photoshop, show you how to quickly create your own texture. I've pulled both of these feather images that you can see on my desktop. I pulled both of these, not here. I've already created these two, but I've pulled both of these images from the internet. And I've already created a texture, which you saw with this. I'll create one now with this image. Say okay. And I'm going to crop this image 256 by 256. Now you can see that this is about the size 100%. And let me make a brush. I'm going to go ahead and kind of select like this, and I'm going to say select, modify, feather, and let's feather this by, let's say 20 pixels. Select the inverse and delete. I might actually want to even expand that. Let's do this a little bit more. Let's say modify and expand by 20 pixels. And let's delete again. Okay, so now I have a feather texture, a brush that I'm going to use maybe for my texture. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's adjust the brightness contrast. First, I'll desaturate it. Because it's taking the kind of alpha channel values, it's taking the blacks and the whites. So the whites is where the color will be applied, and the black is where there will be no color applied when I use it as a brush. Brightness contrast, let's increase the contrast, decrease the brightness maybe a little bit, just so we have a, let's go adjustments, levels. Let's do the same thing here. Let's pull these away from each other a little bit. Something like maybe that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this as, and I'm going to save it under my modeling project folder under source images. I'm going to say feathers 3. Okay, and let's jump back to Maya, quit Photoshop. So now what I'm going to do is select that brush here. Here's my project, right? So under my source image folder, I have my 2 feather brushes. And let me use this one that I generated. And again, press B to increase the size of my brush. Let's go back to my perspective view. And let's change the color here to something even lighter. And we can start to, now you see where those UVs are stretching. So again, we have to prioritize our model. We can either spend a lot of time trying to generate a, laying out the UVs perfectly, which might take some time, or you can prioritize like which view of your model you're going to be rendering or animating from. So I'm going to maybe increase the size of my brush to add some more feathers here, and maybe change the color again a little bit brighter. Let's make a brighter orange. There we are. So by layering my brush, and it's because my UVs are overlapping, it's appearing on both sides. By layering my brush, or layering the UVs, I have the same UVs applied to both sides of the model. It's just something to keep in mind. Okay, now I have a kind of nice texture applied. I might want to keep going with some of the cheeks here because I will go back in and paint over the black. Okay, now let's I might even pump this up just a little bit more. All right, kind of like the way that looks. Now let me, let's just go ahead and save this texture. Okay, so that it's we can go to our UV editor here and see what this looks like applied. You know, it's going to kind of be hard because it's selected. You can see here that the texture file, right? Let's find it in our Finder. Robin Sculpt there. Okay, there's my texture file that I'm generating in Maya. And now I'm going to go back here, and this is great. It's great to paint maybe with a tablet. If you have one, you might have better control. So now I'm going to just start to kind of try to very carefully paint my top feathers here. And I might want to use a softer brush, maybe here, where these two connect. And I'm kind of scrubbing. Again, press B and left mouse click to make your brush bigger so you can cover more area. And now the top of this is really stretched, and we might have a little bit of trouble even painting these UVs at all because we flooded this color. So this is something we might want to fix in Photoshop after, which I'll show you. But I'm going to just go ahead and paint this bird as best I can. I like using my reference image here. I'm just going to start with this kind of gray. And I'll use a kind of gray overall. Beak, I'll get the beak later. And I'm going to adjust the top of its head there in a little bit. But I think this gray is applied across the model. Yeah. So now let's choose a different brush, right? Let's choose the other Feathers 3 that I've created. Let's open that and let's choose maybe a white. See what happens if I start to add some of this. And I think I can maybe, just going to add this texture. And that's okay that they're overlapped there. I might. But this just takes a little finessing back and forth until you kind of have the right kind of look for your model. I'm going to get that eyeball in a little bit. And let's actually give this a black color here for the head. And I think just by kind of layering, the brush tool, I can get a nice effect. I might want to use again that brush that I created earlier, this one maybe. Feathers 2, to add more texture. Maybe the black doesn't work. I need a kind of lighter gray. I'm just going to undo that a bunch of times. And I'm not going to work too long on this. Just want to give you an idea of how to use Paint Effects. Let's go ahead and paint the beak and the eye, and then do our last modifications to this model in Photoshop. Or not the model, but the texture. And it's kind of gray. Let's find that eyeball, which is really dark. Hard to see where it is. Ooh. Be right there. Ah. And now let's just do black again. Okay. So something like that. I think I may want to paint these legs a gray color also. So we'll do that. Let's make sure that our texture is saved. And let's open it in Photoshop. Let's also make sure that our Maya file is saved. Let's save this as paint. And let me open up that texture file that we just created. Let's open. 3D paint textures, sculpt, Robin paint. There it is, right? Open. And now what I want to do is take this color. I'm actually just going to use my stamp tool. Let's just kind of continue. Let's just kind of create a larger scope outside of that, because we were painting on those UVs, and this will really help those overlapping UV situation that we had, because those UVs were stretched. And let me make my brush a little smaller here. Something like that, even on this side. I think, let's see. The best way might be to just kind of paint this a little bit. So find that color, stretch that out. This is just so that those stretched UVs around the perimeter of the UV map carry these color values with it, and they don't have the kind of color that we flooded our texture with. Now I can go ahead and maybe now I can add some more here, fix this, right? It'd be easier to fix some of these details in Photoshop than in Maya. Ooh. I'm just going to go ahead and save so you can see what this looks like. Okay, so I'm just saving that file. Let's go back to Maya here and see if those edges have been fixed. Let's reload there we are. So when I reload it now, some of those, maybe I need to fix that right there, but even though it's still stretching, it's no longer carrying some of that color value flooding. Okay, so there's my finished bird. I could continue to work on this. I can continue to sculpt it even, I think, at this point, if I wanted to continue to maybe work on some of the feathers. These things can kind of happen simultaneously. And I'm going to go ahead and save this again. And so now I have my finished model. Okay, so best of luck this week. If you have any questions, reach out and let me know. I'm going to want you to basically zip your project file and upload that as your final project for this week.